Discussions about the most pressing national security, that what we face and what we're doing to tackle them are always important, but it seems especially well-timed this year with the dangerous implications the very fluid situation in the Middle East has for our homeland security. The reality is that the terrorism has been elevated throughout 2023, but the ongoing war in the Middle East has raised of an attack against Americans in the United States to a whole nother level.
So, blinking red lights analogy about 9/11, all the lights were blinking red before 9/11. Apparently, obviously, all of us missed it. Would you say that there's multiple blinking red lights out there?
I see blinking lights everywhere I turn.
Okay, all right. Can't say any better than that.
The blinking red lights are becoming that much stronger as we're entering this new year here. Remember December 2023 when FBI Director Christopher Wray warned us about potential terrorist attacks? Well, they all seem to be lining up with Donald Trump's return to the White House. We're now seeing alleged terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. In fact, I'm covering a farm in Virginia that is said to have hundreds of homemade explosives. I also have a terrifying update from New York. A man was suddenly pushed onto subway tracks by a guy with a criminal track record. And we now have the identity of a woman who was burned by an illegal alien. Things are starting off way too crazy this year, so let's go ahead and start things off with some explosions. Oh, and by the way, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate you guys joining us. Let's get started.
Developing this morning, a stunning discovery on a Virginia farm. The FBI says it seized the largest cache of finished homemade explosives that it's ever seen. Federal investigators finding over 150 bombs on one man's property, including some that were marked lethal. The FBI now trying to figure out what he had planned as prosecutors call him an extreme danger to that community. News Nation's Alina Shirazi has the latest for us this morning. Alina, how did this guy end up on the FBI's radar in the first place? And do we know what he was planning to do with all of it?
Marky, good morning. Good to be with you. Well, we did look through those court documents and we learned 36-year-old Brad Spafford, you can see him on your screen there. He was arrested earlier this month after 150 finished explosives, primarily pipe bombs, were found during a search of his 20-acre farm. The FBI, as you mentioned earlier, says that's the most they've ever found in the Bureau's more than 100-year history. We know this investigation started after a neighbor reported Spafford's history of explosives and troubling statements. Authorities say Spafford also had an unregistered short barrel rifle, which is what led to his arrest on a criminal complaint.
Now, we're not sure what this guy was planning to do with all his firepower. What we do know is that there is an uptick in terrorism within the country. We've seen the reports from Las Vegas and New Orleans. Both attacks seem to be linked to explosives as well, not to mention electric vehicles. Now, what I find ominous is that our lawmakers seem to be aware of everything that's going on, and yet they choose to keep us in the dark.
Just a final question here for not just people in Louisiana that are watching, but people coast to coast that are watching tonight. Are you getting the sense that there's any other potential attacks tonight on any other major cities?
I can't answer that. I can, but I won't.
Is New Orleans safe tonight?
Yes, but we're still in the process of tightening up security. We're still in the process of doing everything that we possibly can. The governor's called out the National Guard. We've got more FBI coming. We've got Homeland Security people. We've got state troopers who've done an awesome job. We've got the NOPD. We're doing everything we can. But like I say, there's a lot of information out there. Some of it's accurate.
What accurate information is Senator John Kennedy talking about here? Could it be in connection with what FBI Director Christopher Wray was saying years ago? And if we're talking about blinking red lights, we can't forget to address the sleeper cells that they've been saying for years are here, already on U.S. soil. Not to mention the open border policies that the Biden-Harris administration have allowed thousands of terrorists to enter our country.
But I think that what we're seeing as well is over 4+ years, we've had millions of people cross our borders. We know there's sleeper cells in our area. We know they're easily activated. And I think that what you're seeing now is a desperation for both in Iran to refocus and reconstitute its efforts to try and potentially go after targets here in the U.S.
You know, all of that makes a ton of sense. And we know there's a terrorist connection here. And, you know, if you would have asked me this morning, I would say it's fairly obvious. There were IEDs in the area. That flag was very visible. It was right there on the back of his truck.
Now, of course, they're talking about the New Orleans terrorist attack with the electric vehicle that they drove into a crowd just recently. Now, you have to wonder if these attacks are in any way connected to these alleged sleeper cells. And if so, why are they being used now when we're just days away from having the 47th president of the United States? And while that's still a question to many of us, we do have an answer for a senseless New York City recently.
And developing tonight, we now know the identity of the woman who was burned on the subway earlier this month. Fox 5's Jessica Formosa joins us live from Toms River, New Jersey, where police say she once lived. Jess.
Natasha, that's right. The victim, 57-year-old Debrina Kwam. Police tell us that it was here in Toms River where she last lived in this senior living community. Now, as expected, neighbors shocked to hear that she was the victim of that senseless act of violence. The homeless woman who was burned alive in a subway car in Coney Island last Sunday morning. Now, we knocked on a door and a woman answered. She told us that she bought this home in April, and in May, she says a woman by the name of Debrina rang her doorbell looking for her mother. She told her she was the new owner, but she could take down her information. The woman, Debrina, she says, told her that she didn't have a phone. It was about a 15-minute conversation. And then she says she hopped back in the cab and left.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams admitted that Kwam had a brief stint in their homeless shelter system, which goes to show that our country is deeply broken because this woman became homeless and ended up in that subway sleeping. This horrible act was done by a formerly deported illegal immigrant who probably got more benefits than she ever did, which now leads me to more awful New York news where a man was minding his own business and he was cowardly pushed by a stranger. Now, the worst part is that he was pushed right onto the train tracks of a Manhattan subway with an incoming train coming. Now, the attack was called random, where a 45-year-old man was miraculously survived with just a minor injury. The suspect, 23 years old, whose name is being withheld because he has not been officially charged, he's had several run-ins with the NYPD. Now, I'm not sure why this coward isn't behind bars, but he's done a few terrible things. He slammed a cop to the ground in 2019 as the officer spotted him acting disorderly. He has an open case in Brooklyn that's connected to assault, harassment, weapons possession charges. The list goes on and on and on, which begs the question, when do we get these dangers to society off of our streets? Now, with the concern at an all-time high, many people say that it's time for a change, with plenty of Americans excited at the idea of Donald Trump's second presidential term. Now, some people call it the most embarrassing 4 years in U.S. history. A new lawsuit has accused former Democratic Mayor Bill de Blasio's administration of stripping citizens of their basic liberties and playing favorites when doling out exemptions to restrictive vaccine mandates during the COVID-19 pandemic. And lastly, 21 states will increase their minimum wage in 2025, meaning raises for more than 9 million workers. Stay tuned, guys. There is definitely a catch with this. Now, first on our list, guys, really is this brutal highlight reel that President-elect Trump shared of Democrats repeatedly praising President Biden's mental sharpness. It's especially controversial because it's literally just been days since a veteran reporter blasted those who helped hide his obvious cognitive decline. Here, watch this.
Does the president have the stamina, physically and mentally, do you think, to continue on even after 2024?
Don, you're asking me this question. Oh my gosh, he's the president of the United States. You know, I can't even keep up with him.
The most difficult part about a meeting with President Biden is preparing for it, because he is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
I can testify because I've been working very closely with this president for the past 2 years. I've been knowing him for 30 years. And I'm telling you, this guy's tough. He's smart. He's on his game.
Joe Biden has vision. He has knowledge. He has a strategic thinker.
The president is focused. He's detail-oriented. He's always thinking about the big picture.
He is engaging. He is capable. He has an incredible record as president.
And I'm often with him on foreign trips. He's at the top of his game.
So he has a vision. He has knowledge. He has judgment. He has a strategic thinking.
I met with the president, 5 or 6 weeks ago, and he seemed fine to me.
I have complete confidence in the president. I have watched him expertly guide meetings of staff and cabinet members. I could not have more confidence in the president.
I would just tell you that I meet frequently with the president, and every single time I meet with him,
He is just fine.
Now, just to remind you guys, if he were not forced out by his own party, this guy would likely have been at the top of the Democratic ticket. Plus, how many times were we told that, we were wrong about President Joe Biden's mental decline, right? And yet a poll just showed 40% of Democrats are stressed out about 2025 and a second Trump presidency. Here's what Dr. Mark Siegel prescribes for that. Take a look.
But Dr. Siegel, these feelings, these deeply held feelings that particularly as this polling shows, some Democrats may feel, is that understandable given the very end of the election season? Remember, President Trump was painted as someone who was really almost evil to an extent, as a misogynist, as a racist, as a fascist, as someone who has Nazi sympathies, and so if you were a believer in that and that's where you got your ideas from, you might be feeling nervous heading into a new administration and this new year.
I have a prescription for that. By the way, a study out of the University of Nebraska by Kevin Smith, a political scientist, shows the exact same thing, that more anxiety, more depression after the election among Democrats that won't let go of the idea that Trump is evil. My prescription is look at it from a different point of view. Get up in the morning and say, hey, here's a president that doesn't use a teleprompter much, that speaks his mind. You can actually tell what he thinks. Maybe the border will be more secure. Find an issue. Find something you think might actually be better. Give the man a chance. Let go of your hatred. Let go of your bad feelings, especially with a new year. That's what a psychologist would say. Mental health is definitely separate among Republicans versus Democrats right now. Republicans rejoicing, Democrats angry, won't let go of their anger they need to.
Sounds simple enough, right? Let go of your hatred. If only Democrats could wake up and actually give this guy a chance, right? I mean, 77 million Americans overwhelmingly voted for the president-elect. That's got to mean something, right? But yeah, Trump shared the brutal supercut just hours after CBS News reporter Jan Crawford ripped the media for helping to cover up the oldest ever president's decline until it was just too obvious to ignore at the debate. And it basically covered the who's who of the Democratic Party. Now, you got the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, just trying her best to look baffled that somebody would even dare question President Joe Biden's mental acuity. She said she can't even keep up with him. Okay, well then maybe she needs to get checked for mental decline too, right? Along with everyone from the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, to Senator Bernie Sanders and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, all of whom were in the video defending Joe Biden's mental abilities in the collection. Now, I didn't show you guys the whole thing, but later in the same video, there was also clips of data that revealed 68% of Americans felt that he was too old to serve another term as president. But nope, they don't seem to be listening. In fact, according to First Lady Jill Biden, Joe's age is an asset. Do you guys believe Jill Biden? Or more importantly, do you agree with Jill Biden on that one? It's just too bad he just can't keep it together until the end of his term. Now, some other Democratic leaders featured in the video included Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Representatives Jamie Raskin and Jim Clyburn. All of them now have massive egg on their face, all without Trump even having to comment on the video that he shared. I guess they really didn't need a whole lot of comment, right? Especially after what can only be described as scathing criticisms from journalist Jan Crawford of Biden, which included mention of the recent reporting by the Wall Street Journal that detailed just how the White House aides covered up the president's mental decline over the last 4 years. In fact, the explosive report says that staffers formed a very tight circle around the 82-year-old Democrat to hit his in-person interactions. But as Crawford pointed out, Biden insisted that he could still run for president. He was probably pressured by his wife, Jill Biden. She always wanted to remain relevant. And so Jill Biden had to push Joe Biden to stay president. Otherwise, who would even remember Dr. Biden or Dr. Jill Biden? You know what I mean? But coming from a pretty liberal news outlet, Crawford admitted that they should have been more forcefully questioning whether or not President Biden was fit for office for another 4 years, which could very well have led to a primary for the Democrats. Basically, being truthful and honest may have actually helped him out. But seriously, at this point, I say that this administration should be charged for traitorous acts against the Americans. What about treason? Perhaps treasonous acts? Maybe that's more in line. But let's see how they like being on the receiving end of the justice system for a change, right? You know what I mean? But let's go ahead and consider a what if scenario just for a second here, okay? Because one of the earliest House Democrats to publicly urge President Biden to throw in the towel believes that if he had remained on the ticket, his party would have incurred heavy losses in Congress. More precisely, Representative Angie Craig from Minnesota said that if Biden at age 82 had stopped atop of the ticket, President-elect Donald Trump would have taken 30 to 40 House seats with him. Now, that would be something, right? She also shared how she couldn't sleep after what she described as Biden's awful, terrible debate against Trump in late June. That was when Craig quickly came to the conclusion that Joe Biden could not campaign and win. I mean, her and the rest of the country. I mean, am I right, guys? And then, of course, Vice President Kamala Harris took the reins and began scrambling to sort through the sweepstakes. But despite their late stage switcheroo at the top of the ticket, which was also not very Democratic considering that they didn't even hold a primary, Democrats still went on to lose the trifecta to Republicans. The only thing they actually had to show for themselves, netting one seat in the lower chamber, the smallest such change in the House's history. So at this point, I think it's pretty safe to say that Democrats are now deep in the midst of soul searching following the sweeping election defeat, and the party is now battling over who was going to lead the Democratic National Committee. And honestly, it's not looking like an easy road ahead. And this is not just some boring internal election. It's a battle for the party's future, in fact. Whoever takes over the DNC, they're going to be setting the tone for what the Democrats stand for and how they plan to win back voters. Can voters even be won back at this point? Are they going to be leaning more into populism and grassroots organizing? Are they going to double down on modernizing the party machine? I mean, honestly, the stakes probably can't be any higher than they are right now. Party's been losing ground with working class voters for years, and a lot of Americans think that is because they're not talking enough about the bread and butter issues, the stuff that people actually care about, like wages, income, healthcare, and jobs. Instead, there's this perception that the party's out of touch, more focused on elite interest or niche cultural debates. And that's got to change if they want any shot at turning things around. So yeah, the Democrats, they're at a major crossroads right now, and they got to kind of figure out not only who's going to be leading them, but also how to reconnect with voters in a big way. So the question is, can they pull it all together, or is this the beginning of an even bigger shakeup, right? Drop a quick yes or no in the comments down below. Hit the like button to show your support for the video, for the work that we do right here on the channel, guys. And while you guys are at it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, tap that notification bell for more updates like this one. All right, guys, so another major Democratic controversy that broke out just recently is this one. It's a new lawsuit that's accusing former Mayor Bill de Blasio's administration of stripping citizens of their basic liberties and playing favorites while doling out exemptions to restrictive vaccine mandates during the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is a big one, you guys. Basically, a group of city council members, they came together for this 168-page lawsuit that basically questions why the 2020 George Floyd protests were allowed to surge for months in the Big Apple, even as small businesses, religious institutions, and schools were shuttered. Now, according to the filing, NYC residents were lied to about the effectiveness of the lockdown and the vaccine stopping the spread. Hundreds of city workers lost their jobs for not complying with vaccine mandates. But Dr. Jay Varma, then the COVID czar, was caught on camera earlier this year confessing to having drug-fueled sex parties mid-pandemic. Basically, this lawsuit lays out just exactly how much Bill de Blasio's administration got away with during the pandemic. For instance, thousands of non-vaccinated emergency responders were forced to work without being properly informed about the virus or even given the proper protective gear, as protests over the police-involved death of George Floyd surged in May and June 2020. But months later, when the vaccines became available, many of those who refused to get the jab lost their jobs. If you're watching this video right now, ask yourself, did you lose your job, or maybe you were threatened to lose your job for not getting vaccinated? Let me know, guys. Now, in short, the protests were permitted to go forward, but everything else used in daily living was shut down. Then in August, indoor dining was permitted, museums, bowling alleys, and other cultural institutes were reopened. But schools, they remained closed. Teachers who refused to get a vaccine were even suspended without pay, and in some cases, they were just straight up fired. Yet, there was no data of any kind to suggest that the former mayor's closing of public schools was based on any kind of scientific evidence. So this lawsuit, it's calling it out. And if it gains a little bit of traction, It could seriously shake up how public officials handle emergencies moving forward. It's not just about the finger pointing. It's actually about demanding accountability and fairness. Now, honestly, guys, this could very well be the start of something huge. So yeah, definitely something to keep an eye out on future videos. Now, in other news, guys, nearly half of the states in the United States, like 50% of the states, are set for minimum wage increases on January 1st, 2025, which could mean a pay hike for some 9.2 million workers, just in time for President-elect's inauguration on January 20th, 2025. Now, this is coming from an analysis by the Economic Policy Institute. They found that 21 states will raise their minimum wage at the first of the year, along with 48 cities and counties that are also lifting their pay floors above their respective state minimums, mostly in California, Colorado, and Washington. And I know you're curious, so here's the list of states that will boost their minimum wage at the first of the year, and also how much workers are going to get paid. All right. So Alaska, $11.91 an hour. Arizona, $14.70 an hour. California, $16.50 an hour. Colorado, $14.81 an hour. Connecticut, $16.35. Delaware, $15. Illinois, $15. And I'll try to remember to provide a list in the description down below this video, but there's a long list of states that are increasing their minimum wages, but there's no denying that it's a big moment for wages across the country. Now, for many, this increase is going to mean more financial freedom, and I'm confident that its incoming administration is probably going to be taking this economic ball and running with it coming into the new year. That is, if Democrats don't somehow find a way to make a mess of things before the inauguration date. But let me know your thoughts, guys. Like, are you ready for the new administration to come in already? Drop a quick yes or no in the comments down below. But there seems to be a slight problem with the Republican Party. Now, guys, I covered this in a previous live stream where it is possible that Trump's victory certification is held back for the time being. Make sure you guys check that video out right after this one. As always, appreciate you guys hitting the like button and subscribing. We'll see you guys next time.